I'm gonna tell you the truth too. Here's my podcast. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Andre Anderson. I am both founder and host of this podcast, BSTL. BSTL stands for Building Something That Lasts. Oh, I'm so excited. I got a really good friend online with me. I'm going to introduce him in a few moments. And for those of you that have been following along, I just want to say thank you so much. The feedback has been tremendous, but I feel like this is going to be one of the best podcasts to date that we've put out. And so let me just go ahead and introduce my friend all the way back from high school. Dwayne Matthews, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much for having me, Andre.
Yeah, man. Dwayne, right before we started today, just reflecting, it's been 30 years, 30 plus years of
30 years.
Can you believe that we're old enough to be talking about this in terms of 30 years? I just can't believe it.
30 years. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Seems like just the other day we were walking into the cafeteria.
Yeah, and here we are now, men with families and responsibilities and trying to change the world. So here's the thing, Dwayne. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that know you because you're all over the TV screen, the radio, and stuff like that. But for those that don't, why don't you just give us a quick snapshot on who you are, what it is that you do? I think that will lay the framework for our conversation.
Sure, and thanks a lot, Andre. So I'm Dwayne Matthews. I'm a future of education strategist. I'm the founder of Tomorrow Now Learning Lab. I'm also the head of school at one of the largest virtual schools in Canada. We have a 98% university acceptance rate, about 60% young women taking STEM courses. So we're one of the most successful schools in the world. I have done a bunch of time teaching. I taught grade 3, 4, 5, 6, and a little bit of library. I've done strategic planning and education. I've also done technology transfer and technology scouting. So I really spend my time obsessing about the intersection between what's called the fourth industrial revolution, or this fast-paced digital transformation, and education, and thinking about how do we prepare students for the digitally transformed future world that's unfolding in front of us.
Okay, cool. So Dwayne, it sounds like you have like a real big responsibility in terms of what you do in your career. I also want to say ministry, right? So we're both individuals that believe that there is a God, and we believe that,
Mm-hmm.
there are things that he opens up doors for. So we want to talk about change today, right? And of course,
Yeah.
because you're in the area of education, and of course, I mean, not everybody's going to agree with everything that may be stated in this podcast, but I do love and appreciate the fact that you are trying to tackle a big ship and convince people that there is another way. But here's maybe the springboard question that launches us into this thing. How do we help people to see the need to change, not in 10 years from now, but like right now?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And anytime I say it's a great question, it's because it's a really hard one. And I don't have a definitive answer for you. But what I do know is everyone is trying to get a job done.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to get a job done, and we're not always aware of what the job that we're trying to get done is. So I'll give you an example. Once upon a time, we walked everywhere that we wanted to go. So the job to be done was to get from A to B.
Yeah.
And we wanted to get from A to B for a couple of reasons. A, we want to go see somebody. We want to connect with people. Or B, we need to get something to go eat. And so as time went on, eventually we got on horses. And so the job to be done was still going from A to B, right? And A to B to connect with people or to go find ourselves something to eat. And eventually, a man by the name of Henry Ford came along, and he created something called a car. And, he was so convinced that the car was important, but he said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said more horses. So you'll notice up to today, cars measure speed and power in horsepower.
Yes.
But the job to be done was still the same, which is going from point A to point B,
Yeah.
right? To meet people socially or to get food. So one of the really interesting things is that a lot of young people don't buy cars or are not interested in driving the way that you and I might have been when we turned 16.
That's right.
And the
Yeah.
reason for that is they have their phone.
That's right.
And their phone connects them socially in a shallow way,
Yeah.
the same way that you would if you were connecting.
Yeah.
So the drive to get an actual car
Yeah.
goes down. But we still need to go A to B to get something to eat.
Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
why did I tell that little story? I tell that story because if we want to think about change, we have to think about what's the job to be done.
Yeah.
And the job to be done is the critical piece. What we do is we use whatever technological advances we have,
Yeah.
and we combine those around the job that we're trying to get done. We create a story
Yeah.
or a series of premises around the technological capability we have,
Yeah.
and we turn that story into something that's familiar and easy and less technical,
Yeah.
right? And so what the challenge is when we have new technological components or assets or pieces. And when I mean technology, I'm not talking digital technology,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I'm just talking innovation.
Yeah.
Once we have those new pieces, there's a certain amount of inertia
Yeah.
that we have because we're moving so fast. We're telling ourselves this story
Yeah.
that a lot of times we believe the story to be 100% objectively true,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so I think the key to help people changing is to really hone in on what is the job that they're trying to get done specifically.
Okay.
And then to build evidence
Mm-hmm.
that demonstrates that if you create a certain amount of habits
Yeah.
and a certain framework, you can get that job done.
So let me
And
ask
then
you.
there's two other pieces, but I'll stop there.
So let me ask you this question because I think you're getting our conversation started the right way. The reality is that not everybody is going to agree on how to get to the desired end. And of course, we're talking about education, right? Because that's your area. But we're also talking about change proper in all things, right? So at the end of the day, somebody's going to say, well, you might be able to get from point A to point B faster with a car. But when I walk, I have the capacity to think more and process more about what I'm doing when I arrive. So you have two different schools of thought. One that might say, well, if you get there sooner, you can still sit down and process. Or to the other person that's accustomed to traveling by foot, they'll say, by the time I get there, because I've walked, I'm wide awake. My brain is completely clear. And so I do have the capacity to sell the same thing. So now then,
Right.
Dwayne, and you're tackling a beast, right? I mean, when you think about it, how the educational system has changed since we were kids. The chalkboard, most classrooms that I've been into, no chalkboard. You've got a dry erase board or you've got a smart board. And I'm sure from chalkboard to dry erase to smart board, the challenge has always been, how do I leave behind that which I know works while trying to kind of bridge it and move forward, not knowing whether or not this thing is sustainable? Where do we start with the change, Dwayne?
Right. So great questions. I love your line of questioning. And so what I do is I say sometimes we're in really close when we're looking at something. So let's go with the first example that you gave. The first example about the walking
Yeah.
and the driving.
Yeah.
And so that is true. That's very true. If you're walking, you have more time to think, you have more time to process because you're not in the business of driving, right? And driving requires your attention. If you're stuck in traffic or something like that,
Yeah.
it requires your attention. However, there are a couple things to consider. A, if you are driving a short distance, then the walking makes sense.
Okay.
If you are driving a long distance, right? So I live north of Newmarket.
Okay.
If I had to walk to Toronto every day
Yeah.
to go to work,
Yeah.
even if I got there with all my thoughts in order,
Yeah.
it would be ineffective,
Yes.
right? So it kind of works, but it's ineffective. It's not effective most of the time. So let's think about school, right? You talked a little bit about school. You talked about, no blackboards, but now dry erase or smartboard.
Yeah.
It's really a substitution. Those are substitution technologies because
Yeah.
the form of school is still the same,
Yeah.
right? There's still somebody that needs to be putting something on the board,
Yeah.
right? So the form hasn't changed. It's gotten a little bit, that's what we call an incremental innovation. So it's gotten a little bit better, but it's
Okay.
not transformative. It's not
Okay.
transformative,
Okay.
right? So if we think back about the vehicle,
Yeah.
right, we can say, okay, well, the vehicle can get us really far.
Yes.
But what happened in the pandemic?
Mm.
In the pandemic,
Yeah.
we stopped driving. We said,
That's
okay,
right.
if you have a connected device,
Yeah.
I'll connect with you on Zoom. Is it the same as in person? No.
No.
Is it good enough? Is it good enough? Yes. So the key to innovation is that it starts at good enough and then it eventually gets better, right? Over time. That's the idea of innovation and how things are adopted. The very same with school. Now, if we go back to school, the same example that I gave about inefficiency
Yeah.
with driving,
Yeah.
if we go back to school, if I think of education, if I were to try and mark education for success,
Yeah.
what would I use to mark it? Well, I would mark it for preparation for post-secondary opportunities,
Right.
right? So
Sure.
post-secondary opportunities could be university, it could be
Yeah.
college, it
Yeah.
could be, some kind of successful career,
Sure. Trade
right?
school, something. Yeah.
Right. The post-secondary education rate on most Prussian model schools, which is what we use. Imagine we have a model of school based on a country that no longer exists, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a Prussian model,
Yeah.
and that Prussian model used very specific technology.
Okay.
The technology was a printed book,
Yes.
and that's 600-year-old technology, and it was
Yeah.
supported by a pencil from 1662, a pen from 1888,
Mm-hmm.
a blackboard from 1801. And
Okay.
so to use that technology, we had a specific form, a kind of classroom, if you will.
Yes.
So what's the success rate? The success rate is 35%. 35% of people successfully go on to some form of post-secondary education coming out of school.
Okay. So that's a third.
It's right.
Okay.
So imagine if you got 35%, you came home to your mom
Yeah.
and you showed her 35% on a report card. Would she say, oh, this is great, keep going?
Well, she's seen a
Right?
few of those in my lifetime. So I hear you. I hear you.
Right? But
Yeah.
so that's what we have.
Yeah.
So it's not, people say, well, Dwayne, are you against teachers? Are you against? No. The teachers are fantastic. They're
Yeah.
actually working in a very difficult. What's happened, though, is the innovations around education have changed.
Right.
And so we now have more opportunities to personalize. So very same way with a job to be done,
Yeah.
right? I could take the Zoom.
Yeah.
I could go drive to see you if it's a short distance and
Yeah.
I'm, living downtown.
Yeah.
I could walk.
Yeah.
But the idea of personalization at scale
Yeah.
allows us to transform because it helps more of us to get the job done
Yeah.
that we're trying to do. So the hardest part is really to figure out what's the job that people are trying to get done. And if we can help them to do that job more effectively and more efficiently, we have a little bit of an easier road, not an easier road, but a little bit of an easier road to come up with that transformation.
All right. So now I have another question then. Okay. So let's just go with this number of 35% that go on to post-secondary education, whatever that looks like. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When we now begin to go into our toolbox and add things that's going to bump that number up. And of course, we're making some assumptions, right? We're making some assumptions that the 35% that go on to university, they find jobs, they are productive, they are change agents themselves. We make some of those assumptions, right? And of course, we belong to a culture that really pushes the idea around formal education. Now, one of these days, maybe we can argue about that a little bit more, but that day is not for today. But let's just say that we stick with this idea around traditional education. How then, or what do we introduce to move that number from 35 to maybe 50% or 60%? What small tool could we use to leverage that?
Sure. So a few things, right? You talk a little bit about assumptions. And so let me go through a few of those.
Okay.
So the first thing is 35% the global average.
Okay.
We actually live in the country with the highest post-secondary educated population on planet Earth at 50%. That's Canada.
All right.
Inside of Canada, our post-secondary education rate is 69%, which makes it Ontario is the most post-secondary educated region on planet Earth
All
per
right.
capita.
Okay.
Right, more than Sweden, more than per capita.
Okay.
Right. The second is I was very specific to say post-secondary opportunities.
Okay.
Versus post-secondary education. So post-secondary education is one of the opportunities, whether that's university, college, trade school, whatever.
Sure.
But post-secondary opportunity could be, hey, I'm a basketball player. Hey, I'm a musician. Hey, I've gotten right into entrepreneurship.
Right.
Right. And so that's what I mean by post-secondary opportunity. And the other that you're talking about now is how do we have more people? So how we have more people is we start to think about, well, what was holding people back in the first place? So if we go with education specifically, we can be much broader, right? We know that the technology that we have, a book, right? What do we know about it? How many books can you travel with at once? Maybe 50, right? Maybe 50 if you had a really big suitcase.
Sure.
But you can't travel with thousands of books.
No, cannot.
So what does that mean?
Yeah.
That means then that you have to remember a certain amount that's in that book.
Yes.
And so how do we know that you've remembered? Well, we assess or evaluate you.
Yes.
And that assessment or evaluation is not 100% efficient. Like we know it's inefficient.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you took tests that you got A's on in the 90s. And if I tested you on it today, you won't remember.
No.
Right. So, so it's inefficient.
Yeah.
And we only have 192 to 194 days.
Yes.
And we have a 6-hour day. Could you look at your favorite show for 6 hours, 192 days, and remember everything? Because that's what we ask kids. That's what we ask our kids to do.
Of course.
Right? So 35% of those kids actually can do it.
Yeah.
Right? They do really well.
Okay.
Well, what about the rest?
Yeah.
Well, the rest of the kids, they have an opportunity to access success as well. We just don't have, or we didn't put into place because we didn't have the types of tools that they're going to need to help them get their job done.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so let's, you and I were having a conversation at the beginning.
Yeah.
You and I both got into trouble for talking too much. We both got into trouble for being too loud.
Yeah.
But think about, what was our gift? Our gift was to speak in front of people.
Yeah, communicate.
And we learned through that conversation. If I have to sit in class quietly, then I'm not learning the best way that I can.
Yeah.
And neither are you.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but now here you are as an adult, and that's turned into a huge success for you.
Yeah.
Right? You stand and speak and engage with people
all the time,
right? For a living, and you're very good at it. And so
appreciate that.
So what we realize is if we create more opportunities for personalization to help somebody get their job done, we're going to find we're going to have more success. And can you imagine if somebody was really helping you with this, right? If somebody looked at you when you were in grade 9 and said, this is something that's going to be interesting for him. Let's go down this way. You'd have done better in math. You'd have done better in science. You'd have done better at all of those things. And you probably would be way better, even though you're really good, you'd be way better because you'd have had that much more practice in it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you want to change your mind, you could. Now, this is the key. If you want to change your mind, the key is that you needed to learn how to learn.
Yeah,
and you needed to know, right.
Yeah.
And you needed to know that you're trying to get a job done.
Yeah.
So if you want to change, you can say, okay, I can identify what the job to be done is.
Yeah.
So what's my articulated outcome?
Sure.
And I have the tool set that's going to be able to put me on a path to say, okay, right? I'll give you an example. I'll give you a specific example.
Okay.
Right? I lost 50 pounds.
50?
And 50.
Okay.
And how did I lose the 50 pounds? Because I created a system that I could do daily.
Yes.
And I knew that if I applied the system over 9 weeks,
Yes.
that I would get to a certain place.
Okay.
Right.
Congrats.
So I learned how to do that. Thank you. I learned how to do that. And then I applied a certain amount of discipline. And there's an actual framework for it that's quite broad, that'll capture a lot of people. But that really helps to transform and change, right? Because essentially I hack my brain. I know that if I could just stay disciplined for like 3 weeks,
yeah,
I'm going to see something.
That's right.
And if I see that something in 3 weeks, it's going to hit me with a boost of dopamine that's going to make me want more.
All right, Dwayne, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to come back because you've now said
No,
something.
please do.
Because maybe, well, I hope I'm hearing you the right way, okay? Because, one of the things during this pandemic that we've focused on, we've been talking a lot about systemic racism. And of course, at the beginning of this thing, George Floyd, many of us marched, et cetera, et cetera. So now let's create this bridge into education and learning. Please apply some of what you're telling me in terms of how does this help people groups that come from a loud culture where information is shared audibly and not necessarily through 8 font. What does this change look like for the kid? And my roots are Jamaican, yours are Trinidadian, right? So whether it's in the islands, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in South America, wherever, how does this change then create the change that gives a fair educational system or process to those who don't learn the same way, right? So we've got some numbers within that 35%, but we also have some other numbers that are not a part of that 35%, and not because they're not smart, not because they're not intelligent, but they just can't learn in an environment that doesn't remind them of the dynamic home. So please, if you can help me with that one, I'd love that, because I think somebody's going to have a breakthrough, because we grew up almost being told that if you can't sit down quietly and learn a certain kind of way, take this book home, highlight what you think is important, and get an A, then you're not ready for the corner office. And I think that this is one of the reasons why in our community, we do have a lot of individuals at times who go towards different areas because they haven't been able to learn in a way that allows for them to be in that space and be competitive and respected.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot there, and there's a lot there. So here's what I would say.
Okay.
I would say a few things. Systemic racism, in my mind, comes in 4 parts, right? So when you and I were younger, and maybe you were taught differently, but when I was younger, I was taught that racism really has to do with judging a person, by the color of their skin and not the content of their character.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But but that's one dimension of a 4-dimensional system, because that's not really a system, right?
Right.
That's personal.
Yeah.
And so if we look at the 4 dimensions, right? So think of the first dimension would be institutional. So that would be laws and norms.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're laws and norms. And I can show lots of different ways that will discriminate against a person, right? So for example, let's take race out. Let's just see it as discriminating against a certain type of person.
Yeah.
Right? So the law is, if you're going to school, we'll use school as an example, you have to get to school at about 8:30.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But if you're a teenage boy, your circadian rhythm kind of goes off. So you're actually firing at all cylinders at about 10:30. Right?
Yeah.
So, but you have to go to school at
8:30.
8:30.
Right.
So let's just say the school that you're in has math at 8:35.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Every day.
Yes.
Is math morning.
Yes.
So do you have the best opportunity to be successful in that scenario?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Right. No. So that's institution. So institution is the laws and the norms. The second is structural.
Okay.
Right? The second is structural. That's the combination of all the institutions.
Yeah.
Right? So now let's just say, that time doesn't work for me. let's just say being loud, like you said, right?
Yeah.
You know, from a loud culture, very
Yeah, yeah,
social. I
yeah,
remember, you know, you and I in the cafeteria were
yeah.
talking
Yeah, yeah,
pretty loud.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
So, so imagine now I'm in the mall,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people are like, it's kind of loud, loud bunch of kids. It makes me a
Yeah.
little uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? So now that's a structure,
Yeah.
right? The school wants me to be quiet.
Yes.
The mall wants me to be quiet.
Yes.
The ride on the bus wants me to be quiet,
That's right.
right? It's not what I remember because my house is loud,
Right.
right? So here comes the structure, right? And what happens if I'm loud in the mall? Well, the security's going to come, maybe the
That's
police
right.
is going to come,
Yes.
right? So now there's a structure. And all of those institutions combined are
Yeah.
saying the exact same thing. You need to
Yeah.
bring your voice down, or why are you not in school?
Yeah.
Okay? So now we have the internalized.
Okay.
How do you feel
Yes.
inside of that system? Do you feel the system is for you,
Yeah.
or do you feel the system's for somebody else? Do you feel as secure in the system, or do you feel not as secure in the system?
Right.
And then the last part is the interpersonal. That's
Yes.
when we start talking about the color of somebody's skin,
Okay.
right? That's the surface piece. And that piece, most people, most reasonable people, I would say, at least in Canada, have dealt with that surface piece. Most reasonable people would say, no, I don't actually look at somebody's skin and judge them.
Yeah.
Most people would say, well, I look at the character, and if they
Yeah.
happen to have the same skin,
Yeah.
then I'm judging them.
Right.
But they don't look at what are the laws,
Yeah.
what are the
Values.
structure,
Yeah.
how do you feel
Yeah.
inside of that system,
Yeah.
right? And you can take that model of those four frames and apply to lots of oppression. I could take that and apply it to women.
Yeah.
I could take that and apply it to young kids versus grown people,
Sure.
right? So it's a structure of oppression, it's a structure of order.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is not think about whether it's right or wrong.
Yes.
What we have to do is we have to get back to, again, what is the job that we're trying to get done? What's the articulated outcome and why?
Okay. So
Right?
here.
And so, go ahead.
So sorry to interrupt you. Right.
No,
Because
go ahead. Go ahead.
here's the landing point. Because I know we have to wind down in the next few moments. If change is to happen, right? So I want to bring us all the way back around to where we started. And by the way, this has been a fantastic conversation. Here is the question. If we want to see change, and not just personal change, but I'm also thinking in terms of community change. And I'm not just talking about the Black community. I'm talking about community proper. It
Mm-hmm.
almost sounds to me like we need to stop talking at the interpersonal level, because that may not be the space where real change happens long term that's sustainable, right? So when I hear
Yes.
you talk about phase one, I think phase one is the structural. Did I get it right?
Yeah. So institutional,
The institutional.
structural,
Right.
yep, structural,
Okay.
internalized, and interpersonal.
So if we talk about the infrastructure, the laws, the whatever,
Mm-hmm.
how then
Yeah.
do we get a group of young people that their eyes, they're not looking at it the way that we do now, right? We've had enough life, so we've had enough disappointment. So we know
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
while it's true that you can become all that you want to be, we also do recognize that we've got to at times jump through some hoops and jump over boxes in order to make that a real reality. But to
Right.
the person that's now saying, look, through education, not only do I want to be change, but I also want to create the change. Dwayne, where do you tell them that they should start?
So I would say you want to think about a few things. First,
Hmm.
you want to think about what is it that you want to obtain. And second, you want to harness the power of your will. And when I say harness the power of your will, I really mean that in three parts. So the intention that you have,
Yeah,
your ability to focus on that intention,
yeah,
and the self-belief, the conversation that you're going to have with yourself. The second thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to really leverage strategic imagination,
okay.
right? So a lot of times our imagination is limited. So what do I
Hmm.
mean by that? So first, results imagery. What's the image in my head that's the result? Like, where is it that I'm going?
Yeah.
What's the desired outcome? The next is process imagery.
Mhm.
What are the steps that I have to take? Can I
Yes.
visualize those steps? Not perfectly, but
Mhm.
enough. Can I visualize the steps?
Yeah,
At least the next three, right? And then
yeah,
second, because you and I are people that have a certain amount of faith, guided imagery. So
yeah,
how do I connect to something greater than myself? So
yeah,
that might be God for you. It might be Allah for you. It might be the universe for you. It might be
yeah,
science for you. It might be the scientific process. But
some ways you have those three pieces. And then the last thing that I would say is habit formation. So habits of mind, habits of action, habits of consistency, and actually the framework of building a habit, which is a cue, routine, and reward. And I think once you combine those things, you start to create a certain amount of momentum.
Yes.
You essentially hack your brain into feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
And you get a sense of purpose, and you move in that particular direction. Right. And that would be the first piece.
Yeah.
That would be the first piece. And I would say, I always tell people there are limits to what you can do.
Yeah.
But the space between your limits and where you are now is a massive world of opportunity to explore.
I love that.
I can't come today and say, you know what, I can do anything that I want. And at, almost 50 years old, I'm going to go break Usain Bolt's record.
Right.
There's a limit.
Right. There are some limits.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But what I think happens is the space between, hey, Dwayne, you're 50 pounds overweight and you can be 50 pounds lighter. You can get significantly healthier. You can get significantly fitter. You can extend the biological longevity of your life.
Yeah.
Well, that's the space between my limit and where I am now. And there's a massive amount of opportunity. So what I would say to people is start to think about, where are you now?
Yes.
Where is it that you'd like to go?
Yeah.
And even though there might be a limit, develop a certain framework and bridge the gap. There's a lot of magic in bridging that gap. And I think once you do bridge that gap, what you'll find when you get to your destination is you'll find that there's an opportunity for more efficiency, innovation, and creation to help you bridge the gap even further. Right? Once upon a time, nobody believed that everybody would be able to read.
Yeah.
Nobody believed it.
Right.
There's a handful of people, right, were able to read. But now, in many countries around the world, we have like a 96%
literacy
reading rate in the population, right?
Okay.
And this is in 100 years.
Right.
100 years ago, most people couldn't read.
Right. Wow.
Right? But here we are now, and where most people can read, to a point where it horrifies us if we think, gosh, there's a child somewhere that is 10, 12 years old and can't read.
Yeah.
Right? Like it strikes everybody as horrific. We're like, oh, we have to solve that problem. We never think, maybe, the majority of kids don't read. No, we don't think that anymore.
Yeah.
So I think, and how did we do that? We did that with the Prussian model.
Yeah.
Right? And so now I think what the opportunity is.
Yeah.
What the opportunity is for us to develop the common north. Where is it that we'd like to go? What's the job that we're trying to get done?
Yeah.
B, how do we really focus on will, strategic imagination, habit formation to bridge the gap between our limits and where we are?
Yes.
And when we get to that limit, we often find that the limit is actually not the limit. Maybe we can push it back just a little bit more.
Dwayne, man.
And we can do that intergenerationally.
Look, can I just say this? And I know you're busy, but we are going to have a part 2 to this. This conversation has been incredible. I've been learning, and I'm going to be listening to this over and over because I think you gave us some real nuggets that we can use to at least start the conversation towards change. Next time when you come on, whether your time permits or not, I'll just stalk you down. We're going to talk about this a little bit more now from a corporate perspective, because the reality is somebody decided that this was going to be the educational way, and we bought into it, and it did well while it was doing well. But now that the technology and the worldview and the bringing together of different minds from different spaces, the system no longer supports this new world. And so Dwayne Matthews, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you that have been listening, I know for me, and I hope for you as well, you're inspired. My name is Andre Anderson, founder and also the host of BSTL. If you want to reach out and put some questions there, if you want me to connect you to Dwayne, no problem. BSTLinc21@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining. And Dwayne, wow, this is incredible. I mean, you were smart in high school, but Lord have mercy, you've turned up the gauge even more, and I'm so happy to have had you on our podcast today. Thank you.
Andre, thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the kind words.
All right, take care, man. All right, everybody, this is the recap. So grateful for Dwayne dropping in and dropping a whole bunch of nuggets on us. Here are some things that he taught us today on how to create appropriate change. Number one, be clear on what it is that you are trying to do. Number two, create the habits that are sustainable that will lead us towards change. Technology, number three, technology drives the innovation, but it is not everything. Number four, innovation will take us from good to great. And then, of course, because we're talking about change, he talked about 4 systemic things that we have to focus on. Number one, the institution is the thing that creates the infrastructure. Number two, the structure is important. Number three, the internalized and the interpersonal have everything to do with our awareness of the changes or lack thereof.